First up, we're going to address some rumours. Since Francis posted his sponsored decathlon video, people have been asking what's going on with Scott Bikes. And they've rightly guessed we're not working with them anymore. So what's happened?
I had a fight with Tony at the pub the other day.
Is that unrelated to this or related?
Well, no, he works for Scott.
Yeah.
That's why everything fell apart.
Yeah, but you and him go out in Newcastle, get a bit leery, have a tear up with the lads. That's just standard though, isn't it?
Yeah, that isn't the reason.
Just normal Geordie behaviour. How long were you with Scott?
2 years.
It was 2 years.
Yeah. So back when I was just me as a YouTuber making videos on my own, I had sponsors that blanket covered the whole year to support what the channel was doing. And so I had a bike and equipment as well. And it was great. And Scott, I signed with them 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And then everything kind of changed. You got involved, Emily got involved, and now the channel is very, very different from how it used to be. So we have switched to basically doing project-based sponsorship deals only in terms of bike.
Yeah, so you essentially were a lifestyle vlogger. Then you brought me in, so I started with you 2023, and Emily came 6 months after that when we wanted to start doing the podcast, because Emily's actually got the skills to make a good podcast. Sorry that we're involved in it,
Not
Emily.
today, but
She didn't even press record on the camera.
So then we wanted to do more, or you wanted to do more produced videos, as we call them internally, which is like focusing on products, doing things like the versus videos and that kind of stuff. And therefore, it made sense having other people involved and different opinions, stuff to bounce off. So the traditional relationship you have with bike sponsors just kind of doesn't fit the sort of things that we want to be doing anymore. So like, we ultimately want to be able to, like, we're a cycling channel. The number one thing that we care about is bikes. And therefore, being restricted to one brand's bikes just isn't a very good move.
It was always a bit of a hybrid between, you have what most people probably saw it as, it's similar to an athlete. You're sponsored by a bike brand. You only really talk about that bike brand and you don't talk about anything else. Scott, however, were really cool about it. And when I first started chatting to him, there was a guy called Thad who worked for Scott Global. And I was like, look, I have this channel. I want to be able to talk about other people's bikes. I want to put them in the thumbnails, that kind of thing. And they were very accommodating, and they pretty much let us talk about what we wanted. Anything we wanted to say, we could put in. Any brand we could put in. However, for some reason, it still felt like walking on eggshells a little bit. And that's probably in my own head, but that's just how it was. Whereas the situation we're in now is just freedom.
I guess what sealed it for you, that it probably isn't the most appropriate thing, was we knew we wanted to do more lower value stuff. And the starting point for that was you getting hold of an entry-level bike from Scott.
I bought it at trade price.
Yeah.
I bought it from my own sponsor, which was an £899 Speedster 50, I think, which was the cheapest road bike that Scott made.
What was the video that we did?
It was just like, what does an entry-level bike look like in 2023?
Yeah. And people were not upset, but it helped redefine what entry level is for us as well.
Definitely.
Because it's nearly £1,000. It was spec'd in a particular way. And there was a huge amount of comments which were saying Decathlon are really good value bikes and really good bikes. And we're like, oh, I haven't really thought about Decathlon as a competitive bike brand in this space. You just assume that they're like a lot of the supermarket brands where they just kind of have a generic bike. So we started looking into Decathlon. You found one which you were like, actually, this could make a really good video. They didn't even know we existed. We went in, secret filmed, probably in their shop.
Blurred out people's faces.
Probably shouldn't have, because I think you're technically not allowed to do that, but we did it anyway. Bought one of their bikes at full retail. We did a video on it, and it went absolutely bonkers, which cemented that there is loads of stuff in the bike industry that we should be talking about, and there are limitations about what we can and can't do. So we wanted to get rid of those limitations so we can talk more freely about stuff.
Mm-hmm. It's a learning process, isn't it? Like we've been in cycling long enough that we weren't looking at entry-level bikes anymore
Yep.
because we weren't entering the sport. So making videos like that, despite having a few negative comments on it, it teaches you. And now look where we are. So
Which one? The decathlon one?
the original one. No, the Scott one.
Yeah. We still have a couple of channel level sponsors, but ultimately the goal for the channel level sponsors is that they don't impede us from being able to do stuff that we want to do. So Garmin, as everyone knows, are a channel level sponsor, and hopefully we stay working with them because they're great to work with and they allow us to do cool things. Styrkr and Styrkr are the only other 2 channel level sponsors that we have, which is absolutely wild considering when I started working with you, you had something like 15 channel sponsors. Like the list was humongous. And then before we started doing this podcast, I was like, these are the only ones you got left. And you were just like, whoa.
Yeah. It's less admin though, isn't it? When you're one person, you just get sponsored like an athlete does and go, look, I've got all these things that happening through the year. Your product's probably going to get featured in some of them. Pay me for the year and that's it.
And there's enough money that I can live my life. Like it's security, isn't it? You know?
For sure. Well, you have to think about it because it's not back and forward emails all the time. Whereas now, Cade Media has you to do that and I say, I want to go and do this trip. Is there an opportunity to get a sponsor specifically for that trip? And then you do all the work, figuring it out, who's appropriate, what's going to fit nicely. And then it just happens.
There's a lot of just back and forth, isn't there? Can I talk about a trip, but not in detail? Because we haven't mentioned it, have we?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a trip coming up really soon.
Yeah.
Bikepacking is back on the cards.
Yeah.
I banned it for last year because we essentially needed to rebrand what we're doing and let everyone understand that it's very different. Bikepacking's back on the cards, and the first trip is happening in a month's time. And there's a USP with this trip that I've never seen in the bikepacking space before, ever, from a content perspective. And I'm not going to say what it is because it's amazing. And it was actually you, I think, that drove that
I'm not
idea.
even going to mention it, as in it, when we do it.
Yeah.
I'll let it speak for itself.
I'm very excited for that trip. But ultimately, yeah, we've still got a couple of channel sponsors which we don't want to conflict with allowing us to do the videos that we want to do. And a lot of the stuff going forward, if there are any sponsor or paid stuff, then it's just going to be like smaller project-y based stuff that still is, we are not going to compromise on what we want to do. Ultimately, our number one priority is our audience, the people that listen, the people that watch, and we don't want to do things that are just not appropriate for that.
I think it makes things easier from my perspective to signpost when something's sponsored and when something's not. Because if it's not signposted as an audience at home, then it means it's not sponsored. Whereas before, it's kind of like, oh, you're sponsored for the year. So every time a Tailfin is on my bike, do I have to be like, oh, by the way, they're sponsored the chat? Like, it's impossible to say that every single time. In the same way, like, I don't know, Mark Cavendish is sponsored by Villiers at the moment. He doesn't say every single photo is like hashtag ad or this stuff. It's a bit of a weird grey area in the advertising standards. Whereas now we can be like, if there's a sponsored thing which you have organized for a trip, then it'll be like, this is sponsored here. There you go.
Yeah.
That makes the signposting easier.
And really, if there is some kind of sponsorship, it's because we've brokered something that we think is interesting. So, you know, like a bikepacking trip costs a lot of money. And therefore, actually getting people involved means that
depends where it is.
It doesn't just come out of our pockets.
Yeah, I think the main thing is it's always, I think that audiences are very, very wise to advertising these days. And I think the time of what people call lifestyle marketing, which is, you know, you pay an athlete to ride a bike and they don't have to say this product is great because you just see them riding it all the time. I think that kind of thing is coming to an end a little bit. Number one, because it's a dodgy grey area in terms of advertising standards, but also people are very wise to advertising and they understand that there's potentially a deal going on there. So I think that realistically, we are all in a position where we still need sponsors to be able to make a living and to put out this kind of content for free, all of the content on the channel, for us to be able to put it out for free. We need to make sure that
especially when it comes to trips.
Yeah.
Because, okay, use this as an example. We cycled across America, massively successful, raised loads of money for charity and the videos did great. we had a sponsor for that, Komoot. Thank you to Komoot for actually saying, yes, we're going to sponsor it. They put some money in. We still lost money. It's so expensive.
That trip cost, I think it was about 25 grand.
Yeah, people just don't realize how much stuff costs, but it does. And that's not like, oh yeah, we're staying in the Ritz. That's like crappy motels, food every day because you eat about 7 times the amount of a normal human being, having to fix stuff on the road and you just pay a premium for it.
Even just flights.
Yeah, and the flights take thousands of pounds. Thousands of pounds.
So I think we understand that, and with that in mind, we ultimately just want to be able to be as transparent as possible so that the audience watching can make a decision whether they want to, they understand it's part of it is advertising and they can make a decision on that, whether they want to continue to watch, or whether they don't, and that's fine. But it's kind of being clear about that. And that's the most important thing, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And, like I said, like for me, the only thing I actually care about is the people watching the videos and listening to us listening to the podcast. So like, I'm always thinking about how do we get better value for those people. And one of the ways is not needing them to spend money for us to exist. So for example, we don't need them to click a link and buy a product for us to be able to make money. We don't need them to buy anything that we're doing.
Subscription to our channel.
Exactly, yeah. And then the next thing that we're going to start doing more this year, which I am so keen for, is I want people to be able to get our content for free, and we're going to start giving stuff back as well. So like one of the other things that we can do by having all these amazing relationships with brands is we can go, right, well, we want more product, and we're just going to give it to people for free. We're just going to give our audience stuff and do competitions and give back in that way, because like that's what we want. We want people watching it because they're entertained. They're going to have a great time. They're going to gain something from it, from information or whatever, and where possible, some people are actually going to get some cool stuff for absolutely now as well. So, yeah, audience, you guys, number one priority for me.